Welcome back to Craig and Them. My guest tonight is a self-published author of 6 novels, including I Am Your Sister, In Fear of Losing You, Making Our Difference, and Reality Check. She also has a nonfiction work entitled Living with 3 Strikes Against Me. Her most recent novel, Fostered to Love, is now available on Amazon. So, full disclosure, I have known this young lady, Ericka, since we were about 12 years old. When I started thinking of starting a podcast, your name, Ericka, was one of the very first ones that popped into my head. I really wanted to have you on, and I know, for whatever reason, it didn't happen early on. And I think maybe it was just serendipitous that it happened to coincide with the release of your new book. So I'm so happy to have you on, and so excited to be able to help you promote that.
Awesome. So happy to be here.
Okay, cool. So first off, let's talk about the new book. Tell me about Fostered to Love. Tell us a little bit about it. What's the inspiration behind it, and what do you see with the book?
Well, Fostered to Love pretty much came about in my foster care journey. About 7 years ago, I decided to become a foster parent, and in that time frame, life changed. Being a single female and choosing to become a single parent. At the time, it was a single parent of a sibling group of 3. And it really, it changed life a little bit. And being able to see how the foster care system works was a little bit eye-opening as well. Because, there's always a stigma as far as defects and how they go about or how children go about, I guess, get brought into care. So there's always a stigma with that. And so I witnessed a little bit of that on the good side and on the bad side. So my book is just a loosely version of some things that I experienced.
Okay. So tell me, what do you mean when you say you've experienced some of the good and the bad of that?
Mostly, like I said, most of the stigma that you hear about from, people when they hear about defects, they be like, oh, defects don't do nothing but try to take your kids, and defects, aren't really trying to help families and doing this and doing that. So some of that, I won't say it's true, but as human beings, as people in general, we have our own prejudices, we have our own stereotypes that we put towards certain types of people. And so I've come across certain caseworkers who may have felt, oh, well, this parent shouldn't get their child back because they've had some, substance abuse issues and stuff like that. And so that played a part in, their case as far as, I'll say making the situation a little bit more difficult for that birth parent to be able to work to get their children back, as opposed to actually being support for that birth parent. So that's why I kind of say, as far as the, like I said, as far as the bad side of it, because you would sit there and want to think that, okay, everybody is doing this for the good of the child. But sometimes our own prejudices and our own stereotypes against, whether it be a certain class of people or just people who, like I said, are dealing with substance abuse, domestic violence situations, it's almost like you write them off instead of providing the support and providing the resources that they need to get the help to keep that family unified.
Yeah. And I know I've seen that. I worked with foster care and foster youth for several years, and there was definitely that stigma. And even with the kids, the idea of, well, the apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. So already writing the kid off, at a certain point when they make a mistake, because, well, your father or your mom made those mistakes, so we know you're going to do the same thing. So yeah, I definitely see that. For those of you who, like for me, initially when you were saying defects, I wasn't sure what you meant, but I understand Department of Family Services, right? They're similar.
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's correct.
All right. Now, we get used to speaking in jargon when we work in,
right, exactly.
in certain fields. So when you were saying it, I was like, okay, but now I got your defect. Okay. Cool. So as you've gone through the process of doing that, and you're putting some of those stories into the book, what did you want to kind of get across to the readers when you were, you know, kind of telling those stories, or telling the story of this family as they're, you know, starting to build themselves up?
Well, with this story in particular, it was more of wanting to get the point across and having the reader face their own prejudices,
Okay.
and face their own stereotypes within societal norms. So not necessarily looking at, you know, defects or looking at caseworkers, but facing their own truths. You know, there's been a number of times, not recently, because you know, the children that I have with me now are of the same race.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first began as a foster parent, I was a foster parent of a sibling group of 3 who were white children.
Okay.
And they were people, you know, Black people who I've come across who were, I guess, how can I put it, not as supportive, because they felt as though that, you know, why am I going to help, you know, why am I helping white kids? Why don't I foster Black kids? So, and I still see that out there. And then there were others who just felt that, actually, they didn't even see me as a foster parent. Oh, you must be their nanny. Oh, you must be the babysitter. Like, a Black person wouldn't even be in a position, you know, wouldn't even want to, you know, or even be in a position to, okay, come out and, you know, and foster and help children. So we have our own stigmas when we first look at someone and think all of a sudden, hey, you know, this person is not what you think.
Mm-hmm.
I've come across a number of stories where there's families who've adopted outside of their race, you know, whether it be a Black family that's adopted a white child, or a Black family that's adopted a mixed race child. And when they've gone on vacation, or, you know, just being out in an area that's, you know, not close to their home, that they've been accosted because people will come up and say, oh, well, you've kidnapped this child, you know. And yes. And it's sad that we as Black people are looked at someone that can't be a person.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Somebody that's willing to help regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on both sides. You might have, you know, white people who will come up and say, hey, you know, what are you doing with, you know, this white child? But then you have a Black person come up and say, well, why are you adopting white children? Why are you not adopting Black children? Mm-hmm. So it's like you can't win on either side.
Yeah, but if you were white with Black kids, people would, oh, bless you, you know, you
exactly, you know, it's about, oh, you know, you're doing such a wonderful
right,
job.
You're out God's here work right now.
Yeah. Exactly, you know.
Wow.
So I'm like, why can't we all be seen in that view? You know, yeah. So that's what I hope to get us across. You know, like I said, with this first one, Foster to Love is actually a first of a 2-part series.
Okay.
So the second book, of course, you know, I'm not writing it just yet. I take a break, of course. Mm-hmm. But there will be a follow-up to this one where I get more into the whole dealing with defects, dealing with the birth parents and their side of the story. But this one here, as far as Foster to Love, this was more of just introducing the reader to the characters, introducing the reader to the experience that the characters have faced with family members, with friends, close friends, with their local communities, and also what they have within themselves. You know, I have one of my characters, not to give away too much, I have one of my characters who is personally conflicted, you know, when it comes to fostering white children. Because I have the book set in 2016 when, of course, racial tensions were high, right, due to the presidential election and everything that was going on. So with me doing it in that time frame, you know, like I said, one of the characters was just, you know, I don't know if, you know, like I said, the personal convictions that she felt is whether she wanted to move forward in fostering white children, or the fact that she wasn't sure she even felt comfortable with it, because not necessarily against the children, but it's like, okay, what are their parents like? You know, once we get to meet the parents, will they have some type of, you know, some type of racist tone towards us? So the characters themselves have to deal with their own personal prejudices and stigmas to get past, so that way they can do what's in the best interest for these kids.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's a really, I think it's a really timely story. I didn't realize that there was a mixed race fostering an adoption situation, which is kind of, like I said, it's timely, right? Because we are in such a volatile time, race in terms of race and how we're looking at the world right now. And I think everybody's kind of looking at it through their own tinted glasses.
Yes.
And so we're seeing things in a certain way right now. And so I think I'm really excited to kind of get my hands on the book and kind of get an opportunity to dig into it. So you've been writing for a long time. You published your book, your first book, I Am Your Sister, back in 2003. It always impresses me when I see writers who are able to continually come up with fresh material and produce quality work. What fuels your creativity?
Life experiences. I think after, I want to say 2013, 2014, I believe, was the last book I wrote, or last one I published before this one. Mm-hmm. So I really kind of went on like a 6-year hiatus, and it wasn't planned. Mm-hmm. But again, like I said, that's around the time that I started fostering. So trying to manage 3 kids, and manage myself as far as dealing with, time management. I didn't have time to sit down and write. I didn't even have time to even think of a story. Right. But as time went on, especially, like you said, due to, these past couple years with rising racial tensions and social injustices that's going on, I was like, well, hey, I kind of have a story here. So the fact that, I have personal experience within it, I felt that, outside of this being a great story to tell, that this would be one that hopefully when the readers actually read it, that the emotions that I felt is something that I could, relay across to them in the writing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I definitely understand that. Like, Michelle and I published a book a few years ago, and everything went on halt because right after that we had our first kid, and 3 years later we had a second kid. It's just like, we're just now at a point where they're like able to play on their own, and we don't have to like make sure that they're not killing each other. So it's like, oh, right. I actually have time to be creative now. Wow, what am I going to do at that time? So
yes.
But yeah, I understand. Parenting is it's something else. It's a whole nother. It's a job. It is.
It really is. It's a job. Yes. a whole nother job.
Do you try to relay that with your character? Because it's I know your character in the book is a lesbian couple, correct? And they're married?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Right. And so they don't have any kids at this point. So with the process of them like becoming parents, and that, are you covering that, that struggle of like, oh, this is what parenting is, and oh, I don't get to, are you covering some of that angst and that struggle of that?
Of course. One of the, I'll give, the premise of the story, just to give a little bit. Yeah. One of the characters, she has always wanted to have kids, and the other one did want to have kids, but it's like, hey, well, we're later on in life now, late 30s, early 40s. We're mm-hmm. already settled in. Like, we should be looking to retire. Like, we don't want to add kids.
Right.
So yeah, as the story goes on, once they get into fostering and, that routine is broken, like one of the characters, she, into exercising. So she's used to getting up and going running first thing in the morning. And one of the times, I have her getting up, and the kids are already up and they're hungry. So it's like she can't go out and run because, hey, you got to feed the kids. And she's right. like, So yeah, there's a number of times there where, I have my characters feel that stress of being mm-hmm. a parent and not being able to have that time to themselves, and trying to sit down and thinking, okay, yes, I got a moment of peace and quiet. And next thing you know, you hear somebody yelling in the background because now, the boys are fighting, or somebody done took somebody's toy, or right. something to that effect. You got to get up and yeah. So, oh yes, I definitely, had to add, that real life stress that goes into being a parent.
Right. And that's one of the things I've always loved about your writing is the realness. You do keep it very grounded in realism with the struggles of just kind of everyday life, and then the struggles of dealing with, whatever life experiences are being thrown at you or thrown at your characters. So I've always enjoyed that about your writing. It's always been very poignant. But one of the things that you also always thrown in there that I've seen, and I'm not sure if it's a part of this book, is your faith. That was always a big part of some of your older work. And so with that, and then also with, you being a lesbian, how do you balance that within the book? Because I know some people struggle with the idea of, lesbian Christians and those things like that. And I have those conversations all the time with people, and it's just like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna have to let you believe what you believe. I'm gonna tell you what I've seen with my own eyes and whatever.
Right.
But how do you balance that within your stories?
Well, this story I didn't play too much into the faith part of it, only because, like I said, I wanted to have the focus more on foster care. And the two characters that I chose, they're actually from the series In Fear of Losing You.
Okay.
And when I went back to read that one, I noticed that I didn't do too much there as far as the faith. And so I didn't want to take the characters. I didn't want the characters to progress too much, even though it's like 10 years later for them from that one book to now, or until 2016, where this story is. I didn't want the characters to shift too much, only because I still needed that sassiness for one of my characters. I needed that that dominant side of her. But as far as like my other books, I think it was important because, like you said, there are people out there who believe that, if you're a part of the LGBT community, that, you can't be a Christian, or you don't believe in God, or that God doesn't love you. And, that's not true. I think it's hard for people to try to accept that. I have people in my family who still to this day, don't believe in, and I'm like, look at my life.
Right.
I said, I say all the time how blessed I am. And I tell people who are of faith, if you know anything about Satan or about the devil, the one thing is that he doesn't like it when God gets praised.
Right.
So for me to sit here and say that God has blessed me, or God continues to bless me, then that right there should show you that what I have and what I'm doing is something that he doesn't approve of. So that's usually where I go with that conversation. But sometimes it's just one of those things, like you said, it's just like, what, we'll just have to have, different opinions. And, I'll see you when we get to heaven,
Ain't gonna be mad at you. I still dap you up.
Right. I still, hey, no harm done. I'm not, but yeah, I think now at this point in time in my life, I guess I'm past trying to prove my faith or where I stand as far as my relationship with God to people. It's like you either accept it or you don't. I think when I was younger, and that's probably why I had it in my book so much in the beginning, was because it's like, I was trying to not only at that time prove it to people, it's prove it to myself. Like I know God loves me, so I had to, so it's like I put it in my work to almost, like I said, prove it to myself. Like, okay, yeah, he loves me regardless. He loves me regardless. He loves me regardless. And like I said, I'm at this point in my life now where, I am very strong in my faith. I am very deeply rooted in it. And my relationship with him is far beyond anything that I can ever imagine, for everything that I've been through over the past 15 years now, 16 years, 17, 2005 is how long ago?
Okay.
Yes, 2004, 2005.
16, yeah.
So,
17 years.
and just to kind of you know, because people are listening. They're probably like, why is she crying about that? For those who don't know, in 2005, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. So from that point all the way up until now, I mean, God has done a great work in me, just for me to even be here. So yeah, like I said, I'm at a point in my life now where to try to prove to people or try to convince them that God loves me, you know, regardless of my sexuality. Yeah, I'm kind of past that point. It's like I try to use my writings now to just, like I said, help people to see where their shortcomings are. But at the same time, you know, and you know, it's not just to, like, expose, you know, just saying, hey, you know, this is what you need to look at about yourself, you know, but to open their eyes to what they can do for other people. Like, if you get outside this stigma of what a foster parent is doing, or what a birth parent is doing, or what somebody in the LGBT is doing, like, you could be serving your community a whole lot better. So
yeah, and I think I think any great artist does that, though. You're holding a mirror up to the audience and saying, what are you seeing when you hear me sing, when you read my works, when you read my listen to me speak? What are you seeing in yourself in this? Because there has to be something there. It has to connect with you in some way, right? So if the book is connecting with you, if the song is connecting with you, there's something in there that's touching a part of you, and you need to, like, get in touch with that, like, figure out, well, why is this touching me in this way, and why is it affecting me this way? And I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome that's, you know, a goal of yours, is to kind of, like, hold that mirror up to people and say, you know, what are you feeling? What are you seeing? Get in touch with that, you know. As a therapist, that's my job anyway. So I'm always constantly asking people, like, you know, so what do you think about that? What are you feeling now, right now? So I think that's an excellent, you know, goal to have in terms of your writing and kind of creating that. And, you know, I don't know, I'm not even sure I knew about the cancer. And so I'm, you know, glad that you are here and still here, and that you're, you know, he's blessed you in this way. And so that's awesome. That's amazing. So you say you got one more book to come that's the sequel to this one. So you haven't started working on that one, but that's going to be out. When do you think you're going to maybe be looking to have that one out?
That's probably going to be 2022. As I was writing Foster to Love, of course, you know, there were some things that, you know, different stories and stuff that popped up, you know, different scenes and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's not good for this book. That would be good for another book. And so that's how that kind of transpired. Because when I did the timeline for Foster to Love, I realized, oh, if I keep writing, this is going to be like a 500-page book. So
actually, I did want to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you about your writing style, because I remember you and I had talked about writing a story together, and we kind of got started on it, but it fizzled. But I was really interested in your writing style, because it's very different from mine. I'm a seat of my pants writer. I just sit down and I start typing. But you have a very specific writing style. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, basically it's like, once I have a story in my head, I have to see where it ends. Like, I have to know where I'm going on the journey. So now, of course, the ending may change, but when there's a story that first pops into my head, I have to see where the finish line is. And so what I do is I will pretty much jot down summaries. Chapter 1, summary this, or 2 or 3 sentences for each chapter, and kind of lay it out. And I almost have like, I forget what it's called, but it's almost like a writing board. Actually, I use my wall. I have to send you a picture if I can find it. But yeah, I use my wall, and I literally post those summaries up. And I'm like, and sometimes they don't go in order. Usually it's just things that pop in my head. And I'm like, oh yes, this will be good. And then this will be good. And then I'll just post them all up on the wall. And then I will sit there and try to put them in chronological order. And so that'll give me a timeline. And then once I start writing, of course, you know, the characters do what they want to do.
Right, of course.
So the story ends up shifting there. But usually I can get close to where I thought that my end would be. I think this story here, because of the fact that it is so personal, that it was easier for me to stay on track with this one. It was more so for this one was, okay, I need to decide how much information to put in here. Because some of the stories, they're, they'll be funny, just the way the characters interact with the kids, just seeing how, parenting is for them. But it's like, okay, how much is too much or how little is too little? So you wanted to show enough of the interaction with the foster parents and the children to get an idea of what it's like to be a foster parent in that type of setting. But at the same time, still make sure you don't take away from the message that you're trying to get across.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that the two main characters from this book are actually from a previous book or a previous series. How was that like revisiting those characters and then like fast forwarding them 10 years later? Like, what was that like for you? Because that's a big time jump. I've done stories where it's like, a few years later, but 10 years is a big time jump. So how did you fill in that space for the characters?
I usually did it through disposition. And in the beginning, I actually didn't necessarily think about doing it with previous characters. At first, I was going to just start like a whole new series, brand new characters, but I'll say the laziest side of the writer took over. And I was like, I don't want to have to create brand new identities. So which characters have I written about in the past that would be great to move forward in the future?
Okay.
And so in my book, In Fear of Losing You, the couple that Kat and Cheyenne, so towards the end of that book, they were actually just getting married. So that was the story that I was like, okay, well, you know what? Let's jump 10 years. Let's see where they are now.
Okay.
So there's different spots through exposition that I just sprinkled throughout the book. At first, I put it as a part of the prologue, but I'm a part of this writers group here. Shout out to Macon Writers Group. They're awesome. And so a number of them who've been writing for longer than me suggested that, hey, don't bore people in the beginning by giving them a backstory of where these characters have come from and why they're here. And just had me sprinkle it through, whether it be as a, like I said, exposition or a flashback, or, just to get readers who haven't read my previous books, just to get them caught up. So you don't necessarily have to go back and read In Fear of Losing You to jump right into Foster to Love. Foster to Love really is its own book, but just to get an idea of the characters, you could go back to read In Fear of Losing You, but you don't necessarily have to do that.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's awesome. No, I really like that idea though, of just kind of, because I know I always, when you're writing, I know as a writer, those characters do hold a place for you, and you're like, I wonder what happened to them. Like I'm sure sometimes, like if you're laying in bed, like I know sometimes I'm like a story will go through my head, and I'm like playing out where those characters could have ended up or where they might have gone, and like you go down different roads with them or whatever. But no, that's really awesome that you were able to kind of, laziness or not, take those characters and kind of bring them forward and just kind of like say, all right, let's see where you are now and what are you doing now. So that's really cool. That's really awesome.
Yeah, I think that also too with, as a writer, that sometimes you have some characters that are just your favorite, of course, in my I Am Your Sister series, Simone Holmes was my favorite. So that's why I was able to continue that one with her. And so in writing In Fear of Losing back then, Kat was one of my favorite characters. So I wanted to, I wanted the readers who had, read the book previously, I wanted them to see her progression. And even in this book, where she starts out to where she ends and where the next book, how she'll be, it's a total transformation for her. So I think that seeing that growth for her, kind of like, I'm like, yes, that's that's my girl. That's my girl. So like I had to do that for her. So that way, people can see, okay, yes, yeah, I like her now. Because in the beginning, probably not going to like her too much. And that's all I'm going to say.
That's awesome. So tell people how they can find this book as well as any of your older material that they might want to get their hands on.
Yes, you can find all of my books on Amazon.com. You can search by the title of the books or by my name, Ericka K. Simpson. I'm actually working on my website right now, so it's not up and running, but Amazon.com and also on, like I said, I'm on Facebook, Author EKF Simpson, and I'm also on Instagram, EKS Books.
Okay, and I will put all of those links down in the episode notes. So if you guys want to check out some of Ericka's work, please click down on the episode notes below and find and support our Black businesses, our Black authors, and make sure you pick up a copy of her book. Thank you so much, Ericka, for joining me. I really appreciated this. It was great. It's been great catching up with you. Like I said, we've known each other since we were like 12, which is insane. So I've officially known you a lot longer than I have not known you at this point. But thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Anything else you wanted to add before we signed off?
Yeah, before we go, I want to give a shout out to you. One, for, continuing in your writing. Two, with this podcast that you've been doing. And also, I don't know if you remember, but when I did send you the rough draft of my first book, you were the one who actually convinced me to publish it. I was just writing. Yes, I was just writing just to write, because I think I wrote it around when 2001 happened.
Right.
When 9/11 happened. So I was actually in the military then. And so I was writing it just to kind of get through everything that was going on. And you was like, hey, you should publish this. And I was like, man, ain't nobody gonna read my book. It's like, no, it's really good. It's really good. You just need to get some, do some edits to it, but you should try to publish it. So, shout out to you, because I probably would still have a whole stack of books and stuff or manuscripts on, a file cabinet stuff somewhere, if it wasn't you who had pushed me forward to go ahead and publish my work. So I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. I'm honored to be a part of your journey and to be a part of your story. So, and thank you for being a part of my story here with the podcast. And hopefully we will actually be able to collaborate on something soon, now that my children are old enough where I can actually sit down and write something out. I actually still have that stuff that we worked on too, to be honest with you.
Me too.
So it's something we might be able to pick back up. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Craig and Them. Again, thank you for taking a listen and joining us every week as usual. Please, if you want to follow us, please follow us on Instagram at Craig and Them Podcast, on Twitter at Craig and Them Pod. If you have questions, comments, if you want to be a guest, or if you have idea topics, please contact me at craigandthempodcast@gmail.com. Just, hit that like button, subscribe, let us know what you think. We're also starting to put this on YouTube, so if you want to check us out on YouTube, please go over to Craig and Them Podcast on YouTube, check out the videos, and let us know what you think. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.